promises to destroy, to kill, to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and take the spoil of them for a prey. Look at verses 13 through 17 of chapter 4. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther. Mordecai, let me just give you a little fill in the answer, goes to Esther and says, you don't know, you won't believe what's happening. You and I and all of our people are in danger. Picking it up in verse 13. Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not that thyself that thou shalt escape the king's house more than all the Jews. Now in the back of her mind, she's thinking about the way he dismissed this first queen. So he says, it doesn't matter if you're queen. If he finds out you're a Jew, we don't know. He may kill you. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at a time when their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther bade them return. Mordecai this answered, go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan. Fast ye for me, neither eat or drink 3 days or night. Is that heresy in the Baptist church? Probably. Likewise, and so will I go into the king, which is not according to the law. I'll get into that. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Here is the plan of the devil, to destroy the Jews. By the way, that's not anything new, is it? In modern times we have Hitler. In other times we have the Greeks. We have the Maccabees. But he had a plan to destroy the Jews. Now, let's look at this a little practically today. Has the devil changed his tactics? Not really. He has a plan to destroy this church. I have not been given a hotline on this, but I just know as I read the Bible, he gets us to be selfish inside the church, unforgiving, compromising, unconcerned, you name it, he'll throw it in. Hoping enough mud will stick on the wall. Remember how Haman plotted to have all the Jews exterminated here by treachery? Had Esther kept the fact that she was a Jew a secret, maybe she would have lived. But Mordecai says, who knows? He finds out you're a Jew also, he might kill you. So she makes a decision to, at the right time and at the right place, tell the king she is a Jew. Just like the Apostle Paul, who said, you're going to go down there and we'll kill you in Jerusalem. He said, I'm not ready just to suffer for the Lord Jesus. I'm ready to die for the Lord Jesus. And she says, if I perish, I perish. This is selfless devotion, not selfish. Selfless devotion in a decision to reveal herself as a Jew and the plot to kill her people. Selfless devotion is sadly lacking today. We like the credit, don't we? Not being worried about the outcome. She's standing and she's risking it all. I heard a story about a ship that wrecked once. And the cry came out, help us rescue. There were people drowning. There was a young man who was in pretty good physical shape. And he decided to go out and he kept bringing people in, bringing them to the shoreline, until he almost passed out. And someone said to him, sir, young man, you can't go out there anymore. You'll die. The people you're trying to save will kill you. And he said, sir, I don't have to come back. He says, I just need to try to save one more. That's selfless devotion. The basis for what most people would call a midlife crisis is boredom and life in the routine. Yet one day God awakened Mordecai, the uncle, and Haman, and everything went on to the plot of Haman killing Jews. Everything went on warp drive. So she had a choice to make, Esther did, to go on like nothing had happened, or to do something, letting God use her to do something. It's crunch time for her and her people, and he reminded her, Mordecai did, how God had brought her through this palace and this place for a specific reason. So Esther knows silence would mean her and her people's destruction. Now here I want you to see a sense of urgency we are to live with as Christians. Because I find this sadly lacking in the church. We come to church every Sunday, and yet we don't have that sense of urgency the way Jesus did, who said in John 9:4, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day, for the night cometh when no man can work. There is reluctance to service. And let me just tell you this, if you don't remember anything else I told you today. Reluctance to serve the Lord is to deny God's power. When you say, and we've got, I was going to get to it in the announcements, but we've got a slip in the bulletin today of things that need to be done around here, people who need to volunteer. But if you say, I just don't think I could do that, I don't think, what you're doing, in essence, is say, you know, I just don't think God's big enough to use me to do anything like that. Esther didn't feel that way. She didn't know what the future held. She might die, even going to the king. But she chose to cast her lot with God's people and goes before the king. And he grants an audience. And I want you to see that going before the king wasn't no small task. Some of you ladies today, you'd say, well, you know, all I've got to do is go talk to my husband and get him to change his mind. Hey, you're talking about the most powerful ruler in the world. You just don't waltz in there and say, honey, would you do this for me? He had it set up that anybody who wanted to talk with him didn't just come traipsing into his office. If you came in and stood before him unannounced, he'd cut your head off. Well, he'd say she's the queen. Why would they do that to her? Rule. We don't know. He just picked her out of a bunch of women to be his queen. He could have just killed her just as easily. So the first task is to go before the king. So she goes before the king. And he extends a golden scepter, which means she's welcome. And he must have been in a good mood that day. He might have said, honey, what do you want? You want half the kingdom? Go. She says, I want to make a banquet. And she found out about Haman. She said, I want to invite Haman to that banquet. What's going on here now? The risk is very great. Her people could die. Her people could be exterminated. Now, I don't know that Christians are going to be exterminated today, but I'm going to tell you there's a concerted effort by liberal media, by all kinds of people in government that either are against God's law or ignorant, and maybe both, to exterminate the influence of Christianity and the godly values that we were founded on in our culture. First of all, in the matter of morals. In times past, just lives that people just lived the lives the way they wanted to. They said, okay, you guys can go to the church, but it's not that way anymore in a lot of places, especially in great populated places. Now, if you don't live immorally the way people do, or if you stand against it, they want to get rid of you, or at least your ideals. Churches are under that. Oh, by the way, let me give you an example of this. The people who would not bake the cake in Oregon for a gay couple, they said that's again, we don't believe in gay marriage. You might be the law, but it's not what God says in His Word. We believe we have a right as Christians to do what we do. And by the way, any restaurant has a right to refuse service to anybody who wants to refuse service. Well, that is completely in line with our Constitution, and especially with the establishment clause of religion. But you know what they did in Oregon? They fined them, they shut the business down, they charged them at least $235,000 in taxes and everything, and put them out of it. I don't know if I know they've got lawyers who are trying to, what is that? Let's try going, no, right? Godliness, Christianity, and the salt of the earth against immorality today. How about churches? We're not looked upon favorably by those outside of God. We can change morally with the culture and not be an irritant to anybody, or we can stand for the truth, regardless of how much it costs. Let's look at California. We pray for it. This idea that I, as a pastor, cannot counsel somebody who is committing sin by homosexuality to change their behavior is punishment under law. For the first time in history of our country, here is the government trying to regulate religion. Thank the Lord it passed. But you don't think there's not going to be another one down there? Just try to check out what's in Sacramento. It will make you sick. Well, I digress, but let me tell you, what we're in is about the same thing that Esther was in. Now, nobody's going to kill us all. Maybe tomorrow. But it all starts with killing ideals. And by the way, that's exactly how Hitler rose to power, but I don't want to get into that. A plan of action is in the mix for Esther. She says, I'm going to go to the king. And she went out and announced. He basically accepts her. He accepts her invitation. And the guy that's the most proud about this is the wicked Haman. Oh, his buttons are popping off his shirt. I'm going to eat with the king and queen all day. She didn't invite his wife. But the wife is behind there, Zeresh. But the only thing that's bad is that old Mordecai will not bow down to him. So she says, prepare your gallows for Mordecai. And he's got power, and he gets it all fixed up. They're working on those gallows. Keep your eye on those gallows, who they're really for. She is taking a stand for conviction, and she passes the first test. So she invites the king and the queen, the king and Haman to this banquet. In the meantime, before the banquet takes place, the king is having a hard time sleeping. I don't know what happened, but he just cannot sleep. So what do you do when you sleep? Can't sleep. Somebody says you count sheep. Well, I like to read the Bible. But what he did, he wanted something to put him back to sleep, right? So what do you do? Put your back. You look at all the records, the court records. Boy, they're so boring. They're so dry. He'll go to sleep real quick. But as he's looking at him, he finds something. Here's a plot to kill him, and he didn't know anything about it. And a guy by the name of Mordecai uncovered it, and they saved his life and they hung these people. He says, why didn't we ever reward him? We got to do something about it. So guess who he goes to and asks for his advice? The wicked Haman. And he asked Haman, who's really just strutting around now, what do you think we ought to do for a guy that saved my life and is somebody that's just, we ought to honor? And he said, oh, I'll tell you what you need to do. He says you need to take a white horse, put a crown on his head, and lead him through the city and say, this is the man that the king delights to love, or to find favor with. He's expecting to say, it's me. But he says, good, go get Mordecai and you do that to him. Oh my goodness. You talk about somebody that is humiliated. You could have knocked him over with a feather. And Adrian Rogers said he was so low he could sit on the curbside and dangle his feet. I mean, he's been on the road. And now he's got under this terrible Jew that he hates and is preparing the gallows for him. He almost faints. He can't believe his ears. But the king ordered it, and he's got to do it. And he presumed it wrongly, and he was humiliated, leading. I'd love to see this in the Bible, wouldn't you? He's leading Mordecai through, and he's going, you've got to delight this guy. The king loves him. I don't, but he does. And so here, we're going to have a dinner, and maybe it would be appropriate to say, guess who's coming to dinner right now? Why did Esther choose a banquet to reveal this plot? Because the way to a man's stomach, the way to a man's heart, is through his stomach. Right? I'll give you amens there. One of my first revivals, I had a preacher. He tried to tell me that you need to marry a piano player for a wife. And he said, I was going to do that. I was trying to find a piano player for the pastor's wife. But he says, then my wife, she invited me over to eat. And she said, I'll settle for a cook. Well, they get there, and the bombshell is dropped. If you'll look at chapter 6, verse 3, I'm not going to spend much time here. The king said, what honor and dignity have been done to this Mordecai? He tells him. They said the king's servants that ministered to him, there's nothing done for him. So he does it. Now go to verses 9 through 10. Well, let's get that. I already told you about it. Let's look at chapter 7, verses 3 and 4. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If thou found favor with my sight, O king, and it please the king, let my life be given at my petition, and my people at my request. Stop right there. We wonder what was being fixed. Well, we don't know what was there, but you know whose goose was going to be cooked? It was going to be Haman. What's for dinner? That's what was for dinner. Humble pie. Not just humble pie, fatal pie. And so look at what she says here in verse 4. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But we, if we had been sold for bondmen and bondmen, you put us into slavery, he said, I held my tongue, though the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Now look at verses 9 and 10. So what happens? And Harmony, and one of the chamberlains, let's stop right here. We'll look at that in just a minute. So she reveals it to the king. Well, here's the queen saying, somebody's trying to kill me. What would that do to you if you're the king? He says, who is the man? And here's old Haman right there. Oh boy, you talk about somebody being stark scared. That would be the understatement. Somebody said he swallowed a chicken bone right there, the chicken drumstick. She said, that's the man right there. And so the king is so upset. Look at what he does. He's got the man who's trying to kill the queen and her people. And it says, in verse 9 here, and one of the chamberlains said unto the king, behold, also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman hath made for Mordecai, who hath spoken good for the king, standing in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. Boy, if you don't know, if this doesn't illustrate pride goes before the fall, nothing does. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. This and the king's wrath was pacified. Do you see the irony of all this? He's making these gallows all along for Mordecai. He just said, one day he says, my heart's going to be so glad. He's a sinister character. To see that Jew up there hanging. And they're not the gallows for Mordecai. They're his own gallows. Isn't that the way unforgiveness is? Isn't that the way a bitter spirit is? Isn't that the way it is when we will not relate to people in love? Oh, you say, I've got a right to be bitter. I've got a right to be selfish. I've got a right to be this way. And you're not preparing a gallows for that person. You're doing it for yourself. You're the one that is going to be hanged. That's the way it was when Esther dropped the bombshell. What do you think that's it? Everybody lives happily ever after? The queen's not killed. The Jews aren't really killed. It's not as easy as that. The king has prepared a decree. And if he's prepared, this decree cannot be reversed. But there can be another decree issued. And let's look at this other decree. If you'll look at chapter 9, verses 19 through 22. Almost through. Just hang with me. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt on the wall towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, good day, and of sending portions and other. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews. Now the king told Mordecai, here, I'm going to let you send letters to all the kingdom to protect the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king Assyrians, both nigh and far, to establish them among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar and the 15th day of the same yearly. So there's going to be a feast here. We'll show you in a little bit. As the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning unto a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor. What happened? God turned about the worst thing that could have ever happened, that we're not going to just kill you, we're going to kill your whole people, your whole family, into good, a time of rejoicing. haughty, hateful, hilarious at times, horrible, Haman was hung. And not only that, the Jews were offered protection. When the fateful day arrived, the 13th day of the 12th month, the Jews gathered together in their respective cities and destroyed their enemies. Even the princes and the rulers helped the Jews because they feared Mordecai, who was now the second most powerful man in the kingdom. And it's very interesting, isn't it? That Haman was trying to plot and become the person right by the king, and he got hung. Mordecai was just trying to be faithful, and God exalted him. It meant on the 15th day of the 14th month, a holiday was observed by the Jewish people, and still is today. It's called the Feast of Purim. That means the casting of the lot. Haman cast his lot by his hatred and his sinfulness and died. And guess what? Out of tragedy came joy. It was all because of one woman. A Soviet Jew was recently asked, well, several decades ago, by a Westerner what he thought would be the outcome of the USSR stepping up its anti-Semitic policies. And by the way, anybody that's against Israel, they're going to get it. And anybody that is anti-Semitic in their speech and in their policies, they're not going to survive as a nation, because God has promised to bless Israel, right? And he is, and still does. For him has come the Messiah, from the Messiah. So they asked him about these anti-Semitic policies. And they asked him, what's going to be the outcome of this? This Soviet, or this Jewish person in the Soviet Union said, probably a feast. And he says, what do you mean by that? He says, well, he says, the Pharaohs tried to wipe out the Hebrews, and the result was Passover. Haman tried to exterminate our people, and the result was Purim. He said, Antiochus Epiphanes in 200 BC attempted to do this, and the result was Hanukkah. So he says, you try to kill us, we'll get another feast going. And isn't that wonderful? That the most devious plans of the enemy can be turned into good. Like Joseph said, you meant to evil, God turned it into good. Now Esther explains the origin of the Feast of Purim, a colorful Jewish holiday that today features noisemakers. If you go to this holiday, they have noisemakers going. And every time the word Haman is mentioned, everybody does a noise. I wish they'd do that every time God's name was used in vain in our culture, wouldn't you? I think I'll just take one of those around over at the gym, and I'll just be doing it all the time. Somebody think I'm crazy. What is the result of this wonderful story? It's a wonderful story, the way God protects people. Him before was asked if he ever worried. He says, no. He says, I believe God's managing the affairs, and he doesn't need any advice from me. With God in charge, I believe everything will work out for the best in the end. What's the teaching of Esther? When things are so dark, and things are so tragic, and there doesn't seem to be any way out, God has a way out. It might be through one person taking one stand and saying, if I perish, I perish. But God will use it to turn evil into good. So what are we worried about? We shouldn't be. This all happened because one Jewish girl stepped forward and said, I will do what I need to do for God to work for good. That's what Jesus did. Jesus said, not my will, but thy will be done. I'll go to the cross. I'll lay down my life. I'll let them punish me and kill me. And through that, the greatest thing that could ever happen has happened to the world. Salvation for you and I. May we all be like Esther, and no matter how dark the circumstances, take a stand for the Lord, and the Lord will use us to overcome any barrier that we have. Thank you, Lord, for your word today. It's such a powerful thing, because although this is an ancient story, we still live where this is. We have people plotting, even at this very hour, to take away our heritage, and they're doing a pretty good job of it.